100. Yes, you saw that right. 100. The top 100 free agents. Here it is. It's finally over. The curtains have closed on the NFL season. The Super Bowl is complete. Champions are crowned. And the season is over. Unfortunately for us NFL fans, we have dark times ahead of us. We're staring down 7 months of emptiness. No football, bleak Sundays, and a big piece of sports entertainment gone. After the completion of this season, we don't have much to look forward to. Well, except for a couple of things that completely illuminate this dark time period. These are known as the off-season escapades, draft season, the buzz surrounding the prospects, the new faces of the franchise, the superstars that push to enter the league, the massive surprise trades that sneak up on us almost every season, and the closest and arguably the biggest NFL free agency, where all the players who are free from their current contract look to cash in on a payday. It will be my duty and my honor to predict where the top 100 will go for you. All 100. I promise you this. Buckle in. Grab some hot cocoa, popcorn, a warm meal, whatever. This is gonna be a mouthful. 100, Bears center Coleman Shelton. I'm not gonna pretend to be well versed in the starting center for the Chicago Bears, but I will say this. The Bears offensive line has been pretty terrible. Outside of Darnell Wright, the entire offensive line is replaceable. The Bears have no obligation to sign him, and to be honest, they probably shouldn't. He wasn't the worst center ever. He played almost every snap and was consistent, but he also wasn't great, or even particularly good. I think he's a low-end starter, and potentially a guy who could be sent to fill a gap, be a backup, or become camp composition for a team. This is exactly why this first prediction will go to the New York Giants. Now, this may seem bad since I'm a Giants fan, but I promise I'm not biased. Listen, the Giants on the offensive line, or at the center position, trotted out second-year starter John Michael Schmitz last year, who didn't really take the leap that we wanted. And even though he still has good to decent upside, bringing a guy to compete with him at camp would greatly benefit the team. As I mentioned before, Shelton is a consistent vet who will be a cheap ad for them. Reeling him in for that amount is a glorious proposition. Secondary options are the 49ers and Texans, who would prefer upgrades at line, but if they can't get one, having depth and consistency at a cheap price is something they could really use as a consolation prize. Either way, his deal will probably be a 1-year cheap deal. 99, Steelers wide receiver Mike Williams. Mike Williams is now a year removed from his ACL injury, and after escaping the disaster dumpster fire that was the 2024 Jets, he settled down as a big play threat on the Steelers for Russell Wilson. And to be honest, he didn't tally a lot of production. Under 300 yards combined between both stops this year, and not a single touchdown, which may really suck, but before his ACL tear, he was a borderline 1,000-yard receiver very consistently, and he still showed that very incredible deep ball ability. He's very capable of having a much better season than this prior one. Another year off the ACL and not spending half the year with washed Aaron Rodgers at quarterback would work very well to boost his stat. He very sure could be used as a supplementary piece for any team. It's usually tough to predict where these guys will go. If this was before the ACL tear and a shitty year, it'd be much easier to predict, but Williams is closer to a guy you'd want to take a chance on instead of someone you'd look to for massive receiver help. I think that maybe the Panthers would take a shot at him, or the Cardinals, or the Raiders fit this mold. I think opportunity matters a bit more than fit for him, and I don't really have much logic with this one if I'm being 100% honest. I think I'm going to go with the Raiders. Again, don't ask me if there's any strong reasoning, but I think the Raiders are definitely looking to find anyone to fill a role at quarterback. Maybe a young player like a rookie, or even a potential franchise quarterback like Darnold. I can see a guy like Mike Williams joining a very open wide receiver core, and I can see the Raiders being interested in a low-risk, high-reward wide receiver. 98, Eric Kendricks, linebacker, Cowboy. Eric Kendricks is a large part of the locker room and a leader in a slightly desolated linebacker room. He's also pretty old. His age and injury history has taken a toll on his body, and his athletic prime is far in the past. Despite this, he still has been very productive for this Cowboys defense. This is the first player on this list where re-signing is an actual possibility, and for my prediction, I'm gonna go there. Now, the Cowboys have a lot of expiring contracts that need to be re-signed. They aren't exactly rolling in dough, but they are still in win-now mode. Dak literally said publicly that they're quote-unquote a step away from the Eagles. They have no plans to reset, and they also don't really have much at the linebacker position outside of Kendricks, and his presence in the locker room as a leader is massive, meaning if they could get him on a very cheap deal, it would be worth it to keep him around. A vet on defense who still has some juice isn't the worst guy to sign back to your roster. Obviously, the price matters though. The Cowboys have so much contract on the books that if Kendricks wants slightly more than necessary, they just won't be able to keep him. If that happens, the other teams available would be the Dolphins and the Broncos. 97, Broncos defensive lineman DJ Jones. One of the biggest reasons for the Broncos' turnaround this year was their defense. It rose from being well below average to top of the league and aided them to a playoff berth. A big piece to bolstering their run defense was DJ Jones. He's rated as one of the most disruptive run stoppers in the league and would certainly aid any team he goes to. This includes if he stays on the Broncos. Issue is that the Broncos may not want to keep him. This isn't for any bad reason. He's a solid player, but DJ Jones is turning 30 in a week and will probably want a decent paycheck. With his age and the money he'd want, I seriously doubt the Broncos would give up that flexibility for an older player. I see them maybe drafting a defensive lineman instead of keeping Jones. His age doesn't really match their timeline, but some teams could use his ability to limit the run. Contenders especially. San Fran needs interior defensive line help. They were well below average in stopping the run, and I know they were hurt. Adding a vet presence that is good at stopping the run is intrinsic for a team with Super Bowl aspirations. This is the same for the Bills, who very well could use his size up front as their D was pretty inefficient in stopping the run. The third is the Bengals, who they need help all around, but run defense is a good place to build. I'll give them to the Niners though. Not only do the Bills not have any expendable money for DJ Jones, but the Bengals are a team who have larger priorities than a 30-year-old interior defensive lineman. I'll put them in second and third place. 96, edge rusher, Texans, Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett is cheap. His role as a third edge rusher for Hunter and Will Anderson is one that he's good at. He's a good playmaker, and he's good in short spurts. And with him being pretty solid in that role, I don't see him being paid an unaffordable amount, which is why I think it'll be pretty easy for the Texans to pick him up. That being said, the Texans aren't rolling in dough either, and I could see them maybe deciding to let Barnett go to cut costs. If that were to happen, he'd probably find another team that could use edge depth. The Bears, the Falcons, or other teams who could use him. But hey, I think I'd have him staying just because he adds this extra element to their defense. 95, tight end, Washington, Zack Ertz. This one is going to be quick. There's absolutely no way he's leaving. The Commanders have money, a lot of it. They have tenfold the amount they need to pay Ertz, and they for sure have the motivation to pay Ertz too. Zack has had kind of a revival year last season and was the complete safety net for their rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels. There is no way in hell that they're going to let his second biggest option go. I don't see it close to being possible, especially when you consider how the Commanders are already lacking weaponry. Give me a break. He's going to resign. 94, edge, Josh Uche, Chiefs. Josh Uche's story is kind of funny. Well, not funny, but it's like Dennis Schroeder. He reportedly rejected a bigger contract for a smaller one, then got traded, and now didn't get any playing time in the playoffs, which sucks and most likely means he isn't being re-signed. Now, Uche has a good ceiling and has displayed high-level pass rushing, meaning I could see someone signing him to be a starter, but his lows in this most recent year leads me to believe that he'll most likely be signed to be a third pass rusher, meaning teams like the Bills, who need a one, like a star, won't really get service out of him. I'd pair him with the Bears, who desperately need a depth rusher outside of Montez Sweat. Shoot, they need any pass rushing aside from Montez Sweat. They struggled a lot because of that. Now, again, I don't see Josh Uche becoming a star or anything on the Bears. I mean, maybe, but he's a depth piece with a high ceiling, and you can't really ask for anything more out of him, especially with the cheap price that you're most likely going to get. 93, guard, Will Hernandez. As a Giants fan, I am very familiar with Will Hernandez. Drafted in the same class as Saquon Barkley, and we let him walk in free agency a couple years back, and just our luck, he blossomed into one of the best guards in the league. He was having another great season before he got hit with a season-ending injury. Now, the Cardinals have a lot of cap space and more than enough money to bring Will Hernandez back. The contentious part is if they want him. Of course, he's good, but the concern is the injury he sustained in week 5. Are they willing to take the risk? Hernandez has expressed his desire to stay, but will the price be right? And I'm going to assume that, yeah, they're going to get a deal done. Injury concerns aside, the Cardinals are all in on building around Kyler Murray and this run game. There's no way they're getting rid of a guy who at some points can touch elite guard territory. I feel like they might get him on a discount too because of the injury. I think Will Hernandez staying is a pretty fine prediction to have. 92, Julian Blackman, safety, Indianapolis Colts. I doubt Julian would be returning to the team. Obviously, it's a possibility, but with another disappointing season from the Colts, I seriously cannot see him returning. Now, Blackman isn't a bad player, not in the slightest, but at the same time, he's not irreplaceable. Blackman struggled at times this year, but despite that, he had been dealing with a pretty bad injury the entire season. There are some teams that could use the safety help, and specifically Blackman's ability. Blackman is one of the most versatile players in the league and could very well be used as a jack-of-all-trades player. If there are a lot of tasks needed on the back end, he's the perfect space filler for that. And that's why I chose to look at the Dolphins to sign him. The Dolphins have two safeties expiring in Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland. Both hadn't played astounding this past year, and most likely both won't be resigned. I guess that's a spoiler alert for Javon Holland later down this list, but whatever. The Dolphins are going to need a safety to fill that roster gap, and more importantly, they're going to need the versatility that Blackman brings. The Dolphins already needed someone like that, but with the lack of depth that's already at their safety position, they're going to need someone who can do a lot of things and doesn't cost a lot. Julian Blackman is a person who does that. 91, Tyrel Dodson, Dolphins. This is another one that involves the Dolphins, who the midseason acquisition for them and played pretty decently on their team, especially in coverage. It would make a lot of sense to bring him back, and for pretty cheap too. In my scenario, the Dolphins let go of Holland and Poyer in free agency, which again, that is probably a spoiler alert for later down the list, but I really doubt they let those two players go and then let another solid piece like Dodson go too. He wouldn't cost that much either. It's pretty cut and dry, to be honest. Maybe another team takes a shot at him because he has a pretty decent ceiling, but I don't see the Dolphins in particular letting him go. 90, Nick Chubb, linebacker, Brown. It really must suck for Nick Chubb, right? I mean, this guy was on the top of the world. He was an electric running back, one of the best in the league, arguably the best in the league, and he was on the path to have another great season before he suffered one of the most gruesome injuries of all time. He nearly loses his career, and in the offseason willingly gives up $10 million due to that injury before a contract year, comes back in week 7, obviously doesn't perform well, and then faces free agency. That must suck, right? That's like at least $30 million he lost, including the $10 million he directly gave up. I mean, like seriously, I doubt the Browns would just give up on Nick Chubb. That's absolutely ridiculous. Again, his knee like literally did like a right angle inward. There's no way he's gonna have an elite season coming off of that. And obviously you could say it's a business, but even from a business aspect, this guy was once one of the top running backs in the league. The Browns would be stupid to let that potential walk away, even when you ignore the tragic quality of his story. I think he stays. 89, Robert Spillane, linebacker, Las Vegas Raiders. For the past 2 seasons, Robert Spillane has been an integral part of the Raiders defense. Post his 5 years in Pittsburgh, he signed a short-term deal in Las Vegas and has grown from a rotational piece to the bona fide heart and soul of the Raiders defense. Last year, he even got some whispers for the Pro Bowl in this most recent season. The Raiders have plenty of money to spend. They have the second highest cap in the league, and to be honest, there's a lot of flexibility that would come if they were to sign Spillane to a longer contract. He's 29, which isn't exactly a spring chicken, but not only will he certainly not be an insanely expensive retainment, but the Raiders have the second most cap space too. And since they have a lot of holes, I could maybe see the path of them letting him go for a fresh start, but that just won't happen. The Raiders are trying to win now, which may seem bizarre when you look at the state of the team and the year they just had, but Pete Carroll himself said in the introductory press conference that this wasn't a rebuild. Like, he made that explicitly clear, and pair that along with the fact that he's in his mid-70s, and I really doubt that assessment is far off. Like, even if it was just fodder to please the fans and the teams, there has to be some truth to it, right? I seriously doubt the Raiders are going to go through a scorched earth rebuild with the age of Pete Carroll and his statements that he made, which is why I think they'd heavily prioritize keeping a guy like Spillane, who is a huge leader and a player on this defense, a glue guy that is an irreplaceable thing inside that locker room. I personally think keeping him is the Raiders' top priority. 88, safety, Jacksonville, Cisco. Cisco had a very strong start to the 2023-2024 season, tallying 7 interceptions and getting pretty close to a Pro Bowl. Unfortunately, he took a big step back this year to a point where it wasn't even clear if he was the starter on the Jaguars, which in a contract year isn't a good sign. The Jaguars were a dumpster fire this year, meaning I will cut him some slack, and I feel like the ability to bounce back from what was a down year is still very possible for Andre Cisco. He's only 24 and has shown long stretches of good to very good safety play in the past. His ceiling is high enough to make him attractive across the NFL. I think the Panthers are going to pick him up though. Last season, the Panthers safety room was abysmal, atrocious. They need almost every form of help in that position. It was already one of the weakest groups in the league, and almost every single safety on the roster is an expiring free agent. This is a complete clean slate, an opportunity for them to pick up multiple safeties in free agency this season. Rolling the dice on a pretty young starting level safety with good potential is never a bad idea, and is a step towards building this desolate defense. 87, Paulson Adebo, cornerback, Saints. Adebo started the season well. He played the first 7 games and was solid for the Saints defense. He even tallied 3 interceptions. The issue though is that in week 8, he broke his femur and was ruled out for the season, which puts a bit of a wrench in their plans. I think Adebo has the ability to be a very solid cornerback too, opposite of whoever. He's also young. Adebo is only 25 years old. His injury could be a bit of a concern. I guess the femur is the biggest bone in your body and everything, but he's released videos of him running 20 miles per hour on a treadmill, so it can't be that bad. Overall, Adebo is an already solid player who has shown high level play as of recently. He hasn't been tested as cornerback 1, but he's shown to be an excellent cornerback 2 at the very least. The Saints aren't going to re-sign him though. They're in complete cap hell, and they have been for like a decade now. And with Kellen Moore and a new change of direction, they're obviously going to cut ties with players like Adebo. They'll be searching for cornerstones, not finishing pieces like cornerback 2s, which is why I see him being that piece somewhere else. There are a lot of teams that could use cornerback help, but I'll give him to the Packers. This offseason, the Packers are going to completely revamp their cornerback room. Jair Alexander's most likely gone, and Keyshawn Nixon and friends weren't really cutting it for them. The Packers will add multiple cornerbacks via free agency, trade, or the draft. Adebo is an incredible supplement piece at the very least. The Packers have to add some kind of cornerback help this offseason, and Adebo is a pretty cost-effective option for them, especially with his injury. Other teams I could see are the Patriots and Chargers. 86, Nate Hobbs, cornerback, Las Vegas. Hobbs is a pretty good piece for whoever is going to pick him. He mainly played slot in Las Vegas, but he's shown pretty solid inside-out versatility. That is very valuable for teams along the NFL. The Raiders could easily re-sign him. I just spoke about how they expressed that this is not a rebuild. Unfortunately though, his injury history may cause them to stuff their hands in their pockets a bit more. The Raiders have money, don't get me wrong, but they're hungry to bring in a quarterback and have other expiring deals. Hobbs has also said that he really wants to cash in, and that's why I could see him hitting free agency. As I mentioned before, his flexibility is very valuable to multiple NFL teams, which is why he'd still be sought after for to improve secondaries. The Vikings have more than enough money, and Hobbs could technically fit in their rotation. This assuming Stephon Gilmore doesn't return. He probably won't, but the Vikings would probably want to get younger. So yeah, I'd have Nate Hobbs heading over to the Vikings. I think other teams he could go to are the Bears and the Broncos. Both could use secondary help. 85, Browns, quarterback, famous Jameis Winston. Alright, it's practically impossible to predict where Jameis Winston will go, because he could theoretically go to any team in the league. Well, almost any. Stopgap quarterbacks like Jameis can go to teams with open quarterback slots, but just as much of the time, they randomly go to a team who has an established starter and decide to just chill as a backup. Jimmy G did it, Carson Wentz, and sure others have. So when looking at Jameis, I've already accepted that I probably won't get it right. Still though, I want to make this interesting. I'm not going to have him signing with the Chargers as a backup. That'd be boring. I'll do the Giants. The Giants need a quarterback flat out. And this is a perfect non-committal signing. He's good enough to start in case a quarterback isn't available at 3, but also would be able to play that pseudo starter slash mentor. Not a mentor. I don't want Jameis near my franchise quarterback or any woman. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go. Still, he's a starting capable quarterback, which adds the flexibility that the Giants could use if they draft a quarterback. 84, Chargers interior defensive line, Teair Tart. Teair Tart was picked off of waivers by the Chargers in August, and he was instrumental in their explosion this year. His versatility against the pass and the run cemented himself as a mainstay on the Chargers line, and his play truly has earned him the opportunity for a long-term deal. That being said, I seriously am not sure if the Chargers are going to pay him. He was good last year, for sure, but paying scrap players who happens to have a breakout season in a contract year, doesn't have the greatest track record. They definitely appreciate what he's done, but I don't think the Chargers and Tart are going to see eye to eye on the pay total, and LA will be more than willing to allocate those resources elsewhere. Still though, don't get it mistaken, Tart is an excellent player and will have numerous suitors across the league. I think he'll serve a great purpose for the Dolphins. After losing Wilkins last season, the Dolphins' interior defensive line hasn't looked good at all. Unfortunately for them, they also don't have an insane amount of money to spend in free agency. Teair Tart is an affordable option for them and an instant upgrade to their defensive line. It doesn't flip their problems around, and it's risky considering last year was his first really good season, and also might be a little unrealistic because the Dolphins cut him last season, but still, enough money could make people do anything.
For $50 million, I go to hell.
Secondary options are the Giants, who desperately need someone to rush alongside Dexter Lawrence on the inside, and the Texans, who could also use a bit of help in that department. 83, Tyler Conklin, tight end, Jets. Now I'm going to make this quick. The Jets aren't going to sign Conklin back. The Aaron Rodgers era is over, and they're turning a new leaf. A tight end in his 30s isn't part of that plan. He has some very redeeming qualities. He will serve incredibly as a safety blanket for any team, especially when it comes to a young quarterback, which is why I have him going to the Panthers. Panthers do have Tommy Tremble, but I really dislike the idea of asking him to take a major step up. I think bringing in an established guy for young works far better than hoping for a jump from Tommy Tremble. Now, it's not a wide receiver one or anything, but that's a great establishing piece for a team with a young roster and a young quarterback. 82, Tershawn Wharton, Chiefs interior defensive line. The Chiefs have a lot of important pending free agents coming off of Super Bowl, so sacrifices might need to be made. But it's incredibly tough to decide which one to keep. Wharton was very important to the Chiefs' lead, especially in the Super Bowl. It'll be so tough to see if they can let him go, but it might need to be done. The Chiefs don't have an insane amount of bread readily available, barring some ridiculous cap restructures, which kind of leads me to believe that he's not going to be within their price range. I have the Colts picking him up. They lost Julian Blackman and still need interior defensive line help next to Buckner. I know Wharton wants money and the Colts have enough money to get things done. Secondary options are obviously the Chiefs, since they might have some devil magic in their bones and could work out the cap situation, and the other option is the Giants, who still need someone to rush aside Sexy Dexy. 81, Brian Kelly, center, Colts. Brian Kelly has agreed to part way with the Colts. I'll be honest, I'm rewriting this portion of the script like far after I originally wrote it. I was under the impression that Ryan Kelly was like a 40-year-old vet for some odd reason, and that he'll retire or stay with the Colts. But no, not even close. He's 30, he's 31. So yeah, I thought originally that this is going to be a super simple one because of reasons I just mentioned, but it's not. Not only is he not retiring, he's not really close to retiring either. He's leaving the Colts. So my prediction that he'll either retire or stay with the Colts, I don't know where I got that from. All right, I really have no clue. Let's give him to the Panthers. He's a Panther. They need a center. And I don't think he'll be the long-term option, even though he's a pretty solid player. I think at the very least he could be a stopgap for at least 1 or 2 years. Boom, I guess. Next one. 80, Elijah Molden, Los Angeles Chargers safety. The safety trio that included Elijah Molden this season for the Chargers was incredible, and since they already let go of Teair Tart in this universe, I decided to let them keep Molden. He slid into this defense perfectly and really added an element of uniqueness through the usage of that trio. He's also a pretty cheap player too. I don't think keeping Molden on an extended contract will break the bank. The Chargers would love to have him, but I don't know if he would like that. Now, I mentioned his fit in the scheme. What I didn't mention was that the Chargers rotate 3 safeties or run 3 safeties usually. Derwin, Gilman, and Molden, which added an incredible edge to their defense and allowed the defensive coordinator to do way more. And that's why I know the Chargers would love him, but I don't know if he'd love to be in that position. I don't know the dude, obviously, but there's a possibility that he checks out of there and tries to find a bigger role elsewhere. The problem is, I don't think he gets that money outside of the Chargers, which is why I think he sticks with the Chargers. Yeah, I'm checking it now. Elijah Molden, did he resign? I think he resigned. Yeah, he resigned. So I'm gonna take the W on that. Was a contract cheap? A 3-year, $18 million, $18.5 million contract with the Chargers. including 5. Yeah, blah blah blah. Okay, that's a good enough prediction. Yeah, I'll take my W on that prediction. So we're 1 for 100 so far, or 1 for 20. All right, back to the video. 79, Jeremy Chinn, safety, Commanders. Last offseason, the Commanders built their team around signing many vets to cheap short-term deals. Zack Ertz, Jeremy Chinn, Bobby Wagner, and seeing they made the NFC Championship, a lot of those contracts worked out well for them. Making deals like these are very interesting. Chinn's versatility was incredible for Dan Quinn, and him, along with other free agents, have become staples for the Washington Commanders defense. There's a clear interest on Washington's end to keep him. They have the money to do it too, and the Commanders are an ascending team too. I doubt Jeremy Chinn wants to leave them. Reports already came out that Chinn is likely to have a long-term deal signed with Washington anyway, which is why I'll keep it simple and I'll have him staying with the Commanders. 78, Diontae Johnson, wide receiver, Baltimore. What the hell happened to Diontae Johnson, dude? This guy just completely fell off the deep end. He got picked up by the Panthers last offseason and didn't really do much early in the season. Then he got traded to the Raiders and he went from not doing much to doing nothing. Like nothing at all. And I don't mean he just like didn't produce. Like it was worse than that. Like he not only barely got any snaps at all, but he was very disgruntled too. Like very disgruntled. To a point where it became a locker room problem and he was released from the team that traded for him. He then went to the Texans and did nothing there either. Listen, Diontae Johnson still got the ability. He was never a superstar wide receiver, but at his peak, he was a player who could get well above 1,000 yards in a season. Still, he didn't do much last year and it was very clear he was a locker room problem. There's no real way to predict where he'll go. Maybe he'll go to a contender, but nah, I doubt it. Diontae Johnson will for sure go to a middling team that should give him targets. I mean, God, it's really tough to predict where mediocre receivers will go, but if I had to guess, I think he's a Raider. It doesn't make much sense on paper, but again, I'll cite this every time. The Raiders' comments about not wanting to rebuild and their pursuit of a quarterback, they need to bolster their wide receiver chops, and Diontae Johnson is much cheaper than his shown abilities are. He's a low-risk, high-reward guy, and a team like a Raiders who wants to make a turnaround quick needs a lot of that. 77, Mike Gesicki, tight end, Bengals. The Bengals have a lot of people to pay. Jamar Chase wants an extension, T. Higgins is an unrestricted free agent, and now Mike Gesicki also needs a new contract. It was a huge part of the Bengals offense last season, being effectively their slot wide receiver 3 as a dynamic option in that elite Bengals offense. But with so many Bengals needing to get paid, it's tough to see him being retained without curbing the price a little bit, and I don't know if he will. It's really impossible to project this, but we don't know the philosophy of the Bengals front office. Well, actually, we kinda do. The Bengals are notorious for rotating tight ends on one-year deals. CJ Uzomah, Hayden Hurst, and now Mike Gesicki. The Bengals have been picking up veteran tight ends on short-term deals for a while. Now, they may value Mike a little bit more since Joe Burrow publicly came out and expressed his desire to keep him, but still, there's no way to predict what would happen. That being said, I think Mike is going to try to get his payday. Now, he could definitely stay, depending on how the T. Higgins situation goes, but I think he could also end up leaving. Now, his skill set will be very desired elsewhere. He's an incredible pass catching option and most certainly could be plugged in any offense. And with all of that, I have him heading to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs could use the pass catching help. Among the need for insurance with all the injuries their pass catchers has sustained, including their wide receiver 1, Chris Godwin, and their tight end room not being incredible, adding one of the top tight end pass catching options would do wonders for Baker Mayfield and that offense. 76, Poona Ford, interior defensive line, Chargers. Okay, this is going to be another quick one. With 2 players of the same position leaving, you have to assume at least one of them is staying. If you've been paying attention, Teair Tart is also an interior defensive lineman on an expiring contract for the Chargers. I made the prediction of him leaving, so if we're adhering to the rule I established, then you could probably guess my next prediction. I have Poona Ford re-signing with the Chargers. Boom, done. Next.
Yeah, hello. Which is the end of the first part of the 4-part. Well, I'm doing all 100, so like I did this the first 25. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. This is probably the most ambitious like task or like ambitious task I've done ever. I've made attempts at doing this, but like I haven't like gone all the way. But yeah, free agency starts, like the negotiating period starts on the on the 10th, which means at 8 days. And ideally, I can get the next 3 out in 8 days. Ideally, that's the key word. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it because these take a while. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Peace.